This presentation this week is going to be about the sales tricks and kind of ways that law firms get you to work there. And law firms are sales they have to have a way and reasons to get people to want to work there. When you're looking for a job and when you're getting offers from firms or considering where to work, in most instances, you will go there for one of these reasons. And the point of this talk today is to get you to understand whether those reasons are going to be valid reasons for you and whether or not you're making the right decision a lot of time. And this is actually a very important talk because people will make very major decisions with their lives and their careers based on this stuff. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through these reasons. I hope it should give you a lot of insight into reasons that you may be interested in certain firms, decisions you've made in the past or are currently making. And then at the end of the presentation, what I'll do is I'll take questions about any questions and so forth that you may have regarding anything to do with your career, whether it's what I'm talking about today or anything whatsoever. And if you're new to these calls, typically I'll spend as much time and answer as many questions as anyone has. So thank you for being here today. Okay, one of the best pieces of marketing advice that I ever saw for a law firm was written by Quinn Emanuel. And at that point, the firm only had 40 attorneys, and it was written on very nice stationery. They didn't have like formal brochures and stuff at that point, and they put together and they bound it at Kinko's, and it was just on their law firm letterhead stationery, and it highlighted some very simple aspects of the firm. It said that the attorneys had all been on law review and gone to top law schools and done federal clerkships. They talked about how the fact that there were several women partners and people of color at the firm, that it was the only law firm in the country with no dress code, that it was easy to make a partner at the firm. You could do so quickly. Everyone that went there did trials. They called themselves trial lawyers, not litigators, which is something that I've seen lots of law firms call them, saying that at this point in time, a lot of law firms say they're that. And I think Quinn is the one that invented that. They talked about how people were casual with one another. There was no hierarchy. Lawyers worked directly with clients as soon as they started. They didn't have to wait years to do. They talked about firm retreats. People got together for drinks on Fridays. They had several students from Harvard Law School that finished their first year of law school, as among the top 3 students in their class. Talked about most of the attorneys had gone to good, Ivy League law schools. Talked about how much money people made, and that it was called upon to bet the company cases, and that it had so much work you didn't need to bring in clients to make partner advance. And all of this was true. And what the firm had done was it had positioned itself in a way that really made it positioned for growth and success. And it was appealing to all sorts of attorneys. It was appealing to people that wanted to make money. It was appealing to people that wanted to make partner quickly. It was appealing to people that wanted to be around other good students. It worked. The way that the law firm positioned himself was very effective. And after the law firm started growing, it started saying different things. It started appealing to people that wanted to be with an established firm or an international law firm, the largest pure litigation firm, and so forth. But at that point in time, the way it was positioning itself was in a way to make itself grow and to grow very quickly. And it worked. It was appealing to all people. So one idea to consider and that you should ask yourself when you're looking at law firms to work in is, how does a law firm sell itself to attorneys and get them to work there? And law firms will identify many things that make them unique. And if a law firm is going to make money and grow, the most important thing you can do really is to have people go to work for it and go to work there enthusiastically, meaning they really want to be part of this mission. And because when you get down to it, every law firm is fairly similar. You're expected to sit down at a desk, you're expected to bill hours and not get into trouble and complain as little as possible. And in return for this, you're expected to take the money that the firm pays you. And there's nothing more important for law firms than how they market themselves to you. And many law firms go out of business. They have all sorts of problems. They never grow. And a lot of that is because of the fact that they're not able to appeal to others in the right way. And law firms need to look like the absolute best option for the types of attorneys that the law firm wants to hire. It's just that way all the time. It's very important. And in order to do that, it needs to appeal to them. And they need to portray themselves as different and better. And and they need to speak to you in some method, and they need to look like the best option for the people out there among the thousands of law firms out there in the market that you can choose from. And typically when law firms go out of business, they stop trying at any of this. And it's a cycle of creative destruction that happens in the law firm world. Most older law firms I've seen that go out of business take all this stuff for granted. So law firms try, when you're interviewing with them and when you're talking to them, they try to figure out how they can get you interested in them. And they do this by trying to have the best marketing pitch to appeal to certain types of attorneys. And I've seen in the 20 plus years, I guess I've been in this business, I've seen attorneys give all sorts of reasons for either taking or not taking offers and interviews and applying or not applying to various firms. They're marketing and branding messages that law firms will use to get you to work there. And these are the main ones. And you need to decide the ones that are important to you. And you also need to decide whether or not those methods are true when the law firm's telling you that. The most important thing for most attorneys, of course, is the money that they get paid. I don't know why that's the most important, but especially for young attorneys, it can be very important. And that's often a major determinant of whether an attorney will go to work there. People will ignore all sorts of things in order to go to work in a firm. The money's right. A few decades ago, when I was practicing law, all the largest and most prestigious law firms in Los Angeles paid $85,000 a year to the third-year associates. And a few law firms, Dewey Ballantine and Skadden Arps, and there might have been one other one, Milbank, I think, were on a New York scale that was almost twice that. It was $155,000 a year, which is, you can imagine, was just absolutely insane compared to what other people were paying. And while I enjoyed Quinn and it was a great experience, making twice as much money for essentially the same amount of work seemed to me to be a no-brainer. And that was especially so since I realized that I probably didn't want to be practicing law for my whole career at that point. And the two firms had very different cultures. One was very formal and hierarchical. People literally called themselves, they put Mr. and so forth on the doors, and Mrs. and Miss, or Mr. and Miss. Dewey had a lot of work, hardly any work, and Quinn had a ton. And literally when I got at that firm, I had no work for 3 weeks because the firm didn't have any work. Going there was a big mistake, and it continued to get worse and worse with botched mergers, partners getting let go, and more sorts of stuff. And it was not a great place to work. And so being guided by money was a huge mistake. And there's a potential that I still might be practicing law had I not been like that. That firm had essentially been subsidized by the New York office. But this is not the sort of thing I ever would have known as a law student. While people do get convinced by money, it can be a very bad decision if you base your employment decisions based on it. There's all sorts of things. For example, different class years, some law firms will pay first year's salaries that are very high, but then they won't increase them later. And there's the funny thing that happens at a lot of firms is that some firms will pay the same starting salaries, but then they won't increase the salaries year after year. And then you get the situation that happens at a lot of firms, and it's going on all over, where people that are more senior are making less than first-year associates and summer associates, like fifth and sixth-year attorneys, which is very funny, but it actually happens quite a bit. And you need to understand whether or not your salary is going to be lockstep or based on your hours and performance. You need to understand how business is compensated that you bring in. You need to understand whether participation in committees and so forth, as far as the hours you bill, whether or not law firms pay year-end bonuses, or sometimes they pay them throughout the year. Then there's things about clerkship bonuses, like you could leave and do a clerkship if you want sometimes and come back and get a bonus. Sometimes they'll even pay longevity bonuses for being there longer. There's also factors that determine whether or not you get credit for business and bonuses. And then there's also salaries in different markets. The cost of living and the taxes are so high in New York that you actually would be better off making $50,000, $60,000 a year instead of $185,000 a year in several markets, compared to what the cost of living is in New York. You need to understand what salaries mean in different markets and what they equate to, because just having a high salary doesn't necessarily mean anything, especially if there's a long commute and there's other things that are involved in working in a firm. So basing decisions based on salaries, it can be very risky. The other reason, some of the reasons that attorneys give when they choose law firms based on the amount of money they're paid is they will say things like, the firm made me the best offer, I can make more money there. They pay more money than I'm making now. And working there was a no-brainer because the amount of money they're paying and all that sort of thing. But those are very risky things. Other reasons that people give for not choosing law firms because of the amount of money the attorneys are paid is they may say that the law firm doesn't pay enough. They may say they have student loans and need to pay them off. They may say they need to make more money and lower bonuses and that sort of thing. But the thing to understand, most law firms you don't really need to know about, most people in the market know about how much a law firm will pay. So they don't really need to say much publicly at all. It's a very good way for the law firm to market themselves because once everybody finds out how much that law firm is paying or how much people can make there, then everyone wants to work there. When I got a job at Dewey, all my friends started sending me their resumes. Tons of them did because they wanted to make twice as much money. And it's a good way for a law firm to market itself and establish its brand. There's a law firm in LA that decided to pay the highest salaries of any firm in the country. It's a very small law firm of 20 people. And when it did that, it got all sorts of publicity, which completely paid for itself. And then law firms often will not pay a lot. And it's very common for law firms not to have obviously high starting salaries or even high salaries in the long run. So many times, because they want to get the best attorneys to work there, they will say things to try to convince you to work there. And some of the things that they will say are things like, we don't pay as much, but everyone here can make partner. We're a lifestyle firm, and people here do not work as hard as they do in larger firms. They may require a buy-in to be partner, but we have a lower buy-in. We have more employment security. And then a lot of times they'll say things about being merit-based. You can make more money there if you work harder, if you work as hard as you do at a big firm. So there's all sorts of ways that the law firm often is able to convince you to work there. Other things that they can say are that they have more interesting work and that there's a price for that. You'll get better experience. You get more client contact than at other firms, and that they don't lay people off when the market slows down. And so those are all valid reasons. But in order to really understand if those are true, typically after you get an offer, it's important to talk to people in the firm about that and see if those are things that you believe. And it may be true. And especially for younger attorneys that, and I always emphasize this, your most important thing you can do is get experience early on. It doesn't really, you want to get into the most prestigious firm you can early in your career in most cases, but a career is a long thing. A career can go for, if you start your career at the age of 23 or 24, you literally could be practicing 60 years from now. So whatever happens in the first few years of your career isn't really that important. Now, to be in a major firm, many times it is important to start out in the best firm you can. But even that, there's plenty of people that go to major firms later in their careers that didn't start there. You don't need to stress about any of this too much. Your important thing is to get experience and not really, in my opinion, to worry about the money. But you do want to get experience being trained by the best attorneys you can. Another reason that attorneys go to work in various law firms is the reputation of the firm, and that can determine many times where the attorney will go to work. For the most part, are very aware of the reputation of different law firms. There are various rankings of law firms in the market that people review before deciding where to work. Find these rankings very important, and often it's the second most important thing that attorneys choose. In some cases, when the most highly qualified attorneys at the best law schools not just care about money, they'll sort things based on their reputation. And the very best attorneys, many times, if they're looking at firms in New York or the Bay Area, for example, they will only look at a few firms that have the best rankings and so forth. And so the reputation of a firm is typically going to be determined based on what your peers think, what different reputation sites say about the firm, seeing where the attorneys with the best grades end up getting jobs, how much the firm pays, of course, the types of clients the firm represents, and then how difficult it's considered to get a position at a given firm. Those are other things, are just the accomplishments of the attorneys working at the firm. I was very impressed when I was interviewing with Dewey, for example, because they had the former Attorney General of California there. They had this president of the state bar and some other people, and that looked good. Age of the firm is often a very important criteria. The size, Supreme Court clerks, how much money partners of the firm make, the law firm's reputation in your practice area. the absence of bad news about the firm. A lot of firms have scandals. I'm representing a firm right now and there's been some scandals. People will leave and not go to places because of various things. Those affect the reputation of the firm. Then other things that can affect them would be, the reputation of the firm for not laying off associates. There's some big law firms in New York that used to be considered much more prestigious than they are right now that ended up laying people off during various recessions in 2000 and 2008. They took a big hit and went down from tier one to a little bit because of that. Other things are famous people that have worked at the firm. Then you have all sorts of rankings. We have our own rankings that we feel pretty good about. And then there's vault rankings, there's chambers, there's local city and market rankings. So different magazines and so forth will have rankings. And then what the law firm says about itself in various brochures. In my opinion, honestly, all this stuff is important. But I think a lot of times what makes the reputation of the firm so strong is really who's calling on that firm to represent them and what kind of matters is that firm working on, how big are the clients of the firm that is a firm representing. Those are very important things. So most attorneys will choose law firms based on the law firm's overall reputation. If they get a law firm with the best reputation, they're pretty much, if the firm's paying, they'll take that. And I noticed that people think the reputation of a law firm is so important that I have lots of clients that I represent and attorneys, and they literally are so eager to work in better firms that they will apply to still want to work and still very hungry people that are in their late 50s and 60s and to work in the best firms. And so I think many times attorneys really want to work in the very best firms they can, and it's just very important. And the reasons that you would want to work in a better firm are things like access to better work, more money, the ability to easily move laterally later on to another firm, in-house, or the government. So there are very good reasons that you should want to work in a good firm, but at the same time, it's not always the most important. One of the things about working in a better firm is that if you do work in a better firm, in the long run, your resume is going to look better. Attorneys will many times accord respect to people based on the quality of firm they're coming from. If you're working at a very good firm with very high standards, things that the people there do are going to rub off on you, and you may have actually the ability to attract better clients if you're a partner. And so people want to be in the best tribe they can, and many attorneys, a good portion of them, will consider leaving jobs many times so they get an offer with a firm that has a better reputation. Many times I get attorneys interviews with places, I get them job offers with various places, and the attorneys will come and say that they're not interested in the firm. Many times that they get interviews with, or even when they get offers, and they'll say they're not interested for trivial reasons. Most attorneys will say that they are interested in prestigious firms, but many are not. They'll say things like, I've heard bad things about the firm. I don't think working with there will help my resume. I'm nervous about how it will look if I went to work there and wanted to work somewhere else. And so those are some clues that the reputation of the firm is taking a hit. And law firms definitely use their reputation to get people to work there, have all sorts of ways of doing that. The law firm will tell people that are interviewing there that the attorneys in the firm are considered the best for a certain type of work. They'll often highlight the accomplishments of individual attorneys. They'll tell you that attorneys went to work there that had offers in more prestigious firms. They'll talk about clients that chose their law firm over more prestigious firms. They'll tell the attorney very few people can get offers and interviews there and that they're special. They'll talk about how the firm is growing. And then many times if the law firm is old and established, they'll discuss its history and say that it was involved in the founding of the city and all sorts of things like that. So all those things are clues that the law firm's trying to use its reputation to get you to work there. Many times when a law firm is having reputational issues, it can respond to that and make these reputational issues look more positive. For example, if they're having defections, issues in the media and so forth, the law firm will often make statements such as, the ones that left are the people we don't want. No one here was involved in a certain scandal. Now we're getting stronger. I heard one firm that was very close to going out of business saying the bad people are gone. We're doing our best work ever. They could talk about younger leadership, and now they can finally grow. These sorts of things that they can use when they're experiencing reputational issues. So those are the main things about reputation. That's the second way that law firms will get you to work there. And then the next thing that law firms use that's very important is their culture. And the culture is very difficult, I think, to define. But for me, I think it's honestly one of the most important things. It means that the attorney is going to be comfortable around the sorts of attorneys that are working there. And culture is important. If you're not with a firm with the right culture, it can be very damaging, and you have problems there and not do well, as opposed to a firm where the culture is right for you. And it can be defined as things like how important the attorneys consider making money, and that can be one thing, or it can be a lot of other things. It can be, how honest the attorneys are likely to be in business. Some attorneys are not, some law firms are not that honest. Most of them are, but a lot of them aren't. It can be what the law firm stands for. Some law firms are founded by big firm refugees that don't want to work hard, even in the middle of big cases. Other law firms believe that the quality of work is the most important. And so every possible cultural attribute a law firm has, the attorneys or the law firm is going to have methods for hooking you, things that, from different types of behaviors they consider necessary and important. Other things I would say are the sorts of attorneys the law firm considers role models. So when you go out to lunch and so forth with attorneys, or what are they talking about, or what kind of attorneys do they seem to admire from other firms? Many times there may be a lot of hierarchy. Like I talked about at Dewey, where people will call each other Mr. and Miss and so forth. That's how the attorneys address one another. The sort of people that aspire to do work at the firm. And many firms are composed of different people that are from different types of backgrounds. So some law firms are composed of working class people, others middle class, and different socioeconomic backgrounds. So these are all kind of cultural things, and I don't need to get into all of them too much, but open doors, closed doors, all these sorts of things in terms of how people interact and how people dress and where most of the people in the country come from. There's firms in LA that are Texas firms that have a lot of people from Texas. There's firms where the people are complete lushes and like to drink a lot. There's others where they're not. There's firms that are in LA that are composed primarily of Republicans, if you can believe it, and there's others in the majority are Democrats. Other people are into pro bono, and how's the staff treated? Were people in sororities and stuff in college? And all these things that kind of dominate culture, smoking, outside socialization, business development, where the business comes from, all these things are very important in terms of the culture of a firm. So you need to understand it, what makes you comfortable. And you can walk into many law firms and know right away if you're comfortable there. You can tell by how people decorate their offices. Some offices the partners have a bunch of sports stuff in all of them. And there's people that would be comfortable with that and others that aren't. There's different types of music that people listen to. Some people listen to music in their office, others that wouldn't be normal. A lot of firms, everyone's divorced, others they're not. Some attorneys are very competitive with one another, others are in a culture where they're not. So all those things really have a lot to do with it. And there's just, so much more that goes into it. The cars they drive. At certain firms, people would never be caught dead driving a really nice car. But in other firms, that's very common. Many people belong to clubs. How are the desks all messy? Are they clean? All these things, are things that people pick up. And so there's just so many of them that it's really difficult to put them all into all here. But in general, most law firms will have a culture, and that culture is going to be something that you will pick up on. You need to go to a place where you're comfortable. And so law firms will figure out the kind of person you are, and then they'll emphasize aspects of their culture that make them seem appealing to you. If you see a firm identifying with you because of one thing or another, many times they're using their culture to hook you. I personally, the mistakes that I made as a summer associate in my legal career were about always choosing firms with the very best culture. And the culture match me, and I've been happiest when and so the culture of the firm you're joining is very important, because if you're around people that and support your look on the world and how you think about things, you're much more likely to do better there than if you don't. And if you are in an atmosphere, that can be extremely, and people choose firms because of culture is just all the time. I mean, religious stuff, people that have left religions I've seen in certain firms. I've seen people that would be misfits in certain firms that are not misfits in others. And so all that stuff is very important. Many times when an attorney doesn't choose a firm based on culture, they'll say things like they think the people are strange, they just don't feel comfortable, the attorneys don't look happy to them. They'll say things about the the quality of schools or how smart they think the people are or how dedicated to work people. And so when a law firm starts interviewing you, typically they'll try to figure out what kind of stuff is important to you. So if they think you're into sports, they'll try to have you talk to people that are into sports. If they think you're a certain, they may actually introduce you to people from that. If they think you're from a certain other type of background, they'll try to find people like that who look like you, that they think you'll be comfortable with, and so forth. They'll emphasize all these things because they want you to work there and it's important to them. So they'll often try to shield you from people that you might not like and people that they think you will like. When I was interviewing in Los Angeles once, I walked into an interview and the attorney started chewing tobacco. And this was in Los Angeles, which I couldn't believe. And I couldn't believe someone would actually be doing this in a law firm. And I thought it was so funny. It made me comfortable. And many people would have been offended by that and never worked there ever. But I thought it was very funny. Maybe the fact that someone was comfortable enough to do that in an interview made me really think highly of the firm. So it just depends on the person. But law firms definitely will use their culture and so forth to make you comfortable working there. Okay, another thing that law firms often do is they market themselves by making themselves seem very exciting and emphasizing the high morale of their attorneys. All businesses, law firms go through seasons, and sometimes they appear like they're doing very well and people are excited, and other times they don't. So when a law firm's expanding, it can be a very exciting time for the firm. And then other times the law firm may be shrinking. It can be sometimes a knit place to work after a large case, verdict, or transaction. Sometimes a very important attorney will join the firm. That makes them look with a lot of business and well known. That will make them look attractive. So all these sorts of things can help the firm. But other times the firm actually look generally the opposite, and people may not be happy in the firm, and actually you may get the impression that people are not happy. And so people will often join firms because of the fact that it just seems like a fun place to work, and the law firm can make itself feel fun by including people and doing outside activities and by the happiness of the firm and the people there. And you can really get a sense of how happy people are when you walk around a firm and you see how people interact. And if the interactions are negative, then many times that will tell you something about the fact that it may not be a good place to work. But people say things like all the people are young, which they'll say that they'll talk about retreats, so forth. And because you spend so much time at work, you want to be around other people that are happy. It does impact how well your happiness and so forth. All this stuff is fairly important. When people don't join a firm because it doesn't seem exciting or they get a bad sense of it, they will say things like people don't seem happy there. They'll talk about the turnover. They may say that everything feels siloed, meaning partners keep all their work and don't share clients. And so those are just some things that kind of happen when the law firm may be not feeling that good. To make people excited, they may talk about how young people are, and they'll also talk about how people work together as a team. People stay there people take trips and so forth, and they'll make that kind of seem like a fun thing. So one of the big things, especially over the past several years, has been law firms marketing their commitment to diversity to get people to work there. And honestly, this has become such a huge topic at so many different levels that almost every law firm has something about their commitment to the diversity in their upper level navigation on their homepages right now. Young attorneys take it very seriously, diversity. Any group that I've had any involvement with, joining business groups and so forth, every single one of them over the past several years has brought up how they have diversity. Even is something as simple as an 8-member business networking group where people are getting together. We'll talk about diversity. Diversity is very important to attorneys now, to all organizations in the country. Even for pretty much everything, people are very interested in diversity. And so if a firm isn't diverse, it really does hurt their ability to attract clients. Certain clients will only work with firms if they're diverse, so they need to have a diversity. Many law firms lose business from not being diverse. They also gain business by being diverse. So law firms are, very interested in being diverse. They also need to attract diverse attorneys that are qualified to work there, which isn't difficult to do. But at the same time, diverse people tend to want to work where there's more diverse people. So if a law firm doesn't have initial diversity, it can be difficult. Attorneys will measure diversity based on the number of people of different races and so forth. To some extent, their diversity doesn't necessarily mean tolerance of different viewpoints. but it does mean different types of people. So that's important, having different types of people, and as long as their views are similar, not too far one way or the other, they like that. The staff diversity, some people want different political parties in the firm, but to some people, diversity means only one political party. Presence of people from different economic, educational, and other backgrounds is important. Especially, I think economic diversity is important in law firms. Another very important thing is having people in power in a law firm who are diverse, and that a law firm should be able to demonstrate that people that are diverse can rise. In many cases, that doesn't happen, and that shows that there could be problems if you're a diverse attorney joining there. Law firms need to show that. And then also how likely diverse people are to stay there and how comfortable they seem. And then law firms also don't want to look like they tolerate any people that have any type of issues with diversity or done something that could be considered racist or sexist or otherwise against the diversity policy. So that's important. So there's just lots of things that are important for diversity. And because we're getting to the point where, a substantial portion of the country, meaning, I don't know what percentage is diverse, not having a diverse firm is insane. And so that's something that people take very seriously. And when attorneys choose a law firm, they'll say things about the diversity of the firm that make them happy to join. And law firms really do need to promote their diversity. Law firms that have a hard time promoting the diversity, attorneys will say things like everyone's there is white male, or the law firm doesn't care about diversity, diverse attorneys are leaving, and those sorts of things. Or they will bring up different lawsuits. Many law firms, or a majority of them, the big ones, have had public spats about diversity and sometimes lawsuits, and that's a problem. And then older leadership many times is a problem too. In order for a law firm to attract diverse attorneys, they'll go to diversity fairs. They all have diversity sections on their websites. Many now have diversity directors. They'll also highlight their diversity in marketing materials. Many will do diversity-related training, and then in interviews, they'll take people around to do that. So it's just very important for diversity, and that's something that many people will act on. One thing I can say about diversity, I wrote a book about it because I was interested in it a couple of years ago as I saw it was becoming a big issue, is that many law firms are under kind of an older model, and especially in many parts of the country where there isn't necessarily a lot of diversity. If you are a diverse attorney, it is a good opportunity to potentially try to get in the door at certain firms, because when there's not diverse attorneys, and just because you're the first person or one of the first people that's diverse going to work there doesn't necessarily mean that it's fair. There's a real demand, and I think the tolerance in society now for things that aren't diverse is pretty extreme against non-diverse things. I do think that looking at markets where people typically wouldn't work, as opposed to ones where diverse people want to work, is often a very good idea, because you can get into lots of different firms. And certainly being in a very diverse environment is a good thing as well, but it also opens up a lot of opportunities. And there are a lot of law firms that need diverse people where they're very eager to advance people that are diverse. So another thing, this is back to advancement, that a way law firms will market themselves, and something you should consider is the advancement potential of the attorneys working there. Law firms will certainly use that to market themselves. Joining law firms are very concerned about getting ahead. That's both as partners, many times want to join firms where they feel like they can have a say in management. But in addition to partners, associates want to make partners want to increase their compensation. And so law firms will attorneys will judge the advancement potential of where the partners are coming from. Are most of them lateral? Do they make partner there? Do they typically leave? And what does advancement look like in terms of the partner's compensation? So things people will say about joining a firm is they'll have a client development budget, or they may say it's easy to make partner there. In smaller firms, they may say things like it's easy to advance there compared to a big firm. And then many people can, join firms where they can take over a book of business. And so people have all sorts of reasons for joining firms based on advanced potential. And then they also have lots of reasons for not joining firms based on advanced potential. And I know certain firms where people have never made a partner in a branch office that has been open 20 plus years. So there's some firms that have a very small equity partnership and where it's almost impossible to get in there. So those are some things. And law firms will say things about how much money their partners make, if you can become partner. They'll say how easy it is to make partners sometimes. Sometimes they'll say that we'll show you how to generate business and become one of us. They'll say that they'll give you a client development budget. They may say they have large institutional clients and you don't need to bring any work. So they'll have all sorts of things that they'll say to convince you to join there. And that always, doesn't work. I remember, this is funny, I was talking to another big New York law firm one time about working for them in Los Angeles. And this is a firm that has never made a partner in their Los Angeles office. And when I was talking to the partner, he said something, and I was in the New York office, and he said something like, if you do come to work here because of such and such, would you be willing for us to look at you to make partner, or to be a partner after 5 or after 6 instead of 5 years or something? And which is just ridiculous, because in the history of that firm, they've never made a partner in Los Angeles. But that was a way to make it seem possible when you're hearing that from the head of the firm, which is funny if you think about it. But law firms will often try to convince you to join based on your advanced potential. Law firms, one of the smart ways of them marketing themselves is they'll market the fact that they have a lot of work to get attorneys to work there. And that's something that they often do. Frankly, that's a very good reason to go to work in many law firms. The presence of having a lot of work is employment security. And I do think that's a major competitive advantage. If there's a lot of work in a law firm, it means that you're going to have some measure of employment stability. Busy law firms are obviously doing something correct in the market from a business standpoint that keeps them busy. They provide upward mobility for attorneys. There's a lot of learning, training, and other opportunities. Those types of firms rarely lay people off. There's firms that are very busy. That's actually a good thing. They have opportunities many times, but that other firms don't. Many times you can make partner without having any work and so forth. But one of the things attorneys say is they don't want to go to work at different firms because there's too much work. So they call them sweatshops, or they say that personal relationships aren't valued and so forth. So larger firms that have a lot of work tend to be widely criticized, and it's always been that way. But it's actually, as a young attorney, it's a very good thing to get experience in these firms. It also is a sign many times that there is upward mobility opportunity, but it could also cut the other way, because a firm that has a lot of work may actually be very difficult to advance in. And the reason is because they just need people to do the work. They don't need to share the profits. Typically, the busy law firm will tell you that it's easier to make partner there because of the work. They talk about the fact that they're growing. They talk about the fact that you can make your bonus. They talk about the fact you get a lot of experience. And all that stuff is very important. Corporate attorneys in many firms and litigators and different people typically need to get a lot of experience. And the more experience you get early on in your career, the better off you'll be. There's nothing worse for an attorney than not having any work to do. And it's just completely demoralizing. And so attorneys always want to have work. And one of the most important things you can do is work at a firm that does have a lot of work. Certainly, you need to have basic concerns about your health and so forth, but having access to a lot of work is a good thing. Other law firms will market their expertise in different practice areas to get people to work there. They'll talk about, that they're the go-to firm for a given practice area. They'll talk about the fact that they have the largest number of attorneys in their practice area. One law firm, I remember placing someone in, and a market said, we're the only firm for this practice area, which the only choice that the person would possibly have. So they'll talk about all sorts of things. They'll talk about the size of their deals, and that will get people interested. And those are all factors that you should consider. And those are all very important. And so things like they'll say they're the only game in town, does nothing but my practice area, and the firm is strongest in my practice area. Those are all really important things. And these are just some statements that kind of law firms will say. They'll say, if you wanted to get public company work, we're the best place to do it. We get all the best cases. There's no place to get better experience. And many times they're right. Different law firms will have different ways of kind of marketing that stuff. And many times attorneys will not go to work in different firms because of the practice area. And frankly, that can be a very good decision. I've spoken to attorneys many times that haven't taken jobs in certain firms, and they haven't taken them because the firm simply doesn't have the work. And they don't have, and the attorney will, if the attorney is the corporate attorney, they may only have small private company work or mid-sized private clients. Or if the firm is a litigation client, they may not be taking big, litigation cases. Dewey Valentine, it was famous that when they would bring in co-counsel on the West Coast, they would never bring in their own people. They would bring in other firms, which is just must have been completely demoralizing for the partners there. And in other practice areas are support practice areas. So tax is a famous one that typically will support the corporate practice, but there are some independent tax practices that are independent. So people have all sorts of reasons for not choosing firms based on a practice area. This is something that you really need to consider when you're joining a firm, whether or not does a firm generate its own work. So that's very important. Another thing that law firms will do is they'll market connection. That's actually important. They'll have mentors, they'll have other forms of support, and some law firms don't believe they need to do that, especially many established firms don't. And law firm people can be persuaded to join law firms when they believe they're going to get the opportunity to work with certain other attorneys, or there are other attorneys out there who will protect them. So they may be lured by the fact that they're someone very highly regarded at the firm that they want to work with. So there may be a very well-known attorney that they could work with. If an attorney reaches out and recruits an attorney from that firm, reaches out and recruits them, or the firm takes an interest in them specifically from someone that they know, or the firm has a recruiter call them or something, that actually makes them feel very good. I've had people recruited away from here. One of the reasons they give me is that they were recruited. Attorneys like feeling valued. And many times they simply may believe that there's, people in power there that will help them and that sort of thing. So all this stuff, having a bond is important. People will say things like, I'm going to work for a huge judge for my practice area. I'll be working with friends, people that have my back, and those sorts of things. And honestly, I think having that sort of connection with someone at a firm and having a mentor and someone that's going to look out for you is unbelievably important. Just going to a firm as a nameless cog in the wheel, it can be very dangerous. If you really do have a connection with someone and someone that you think will help you and will look out for your career and take you under their wing, it can make a huge difference. I know I've had people that I've known that their whole careers have functioned based on that, and it can be very helpful. Candidates will often not, or attorneys will often, not choose law firms based on mentors. They'll feel like there's not people there that will go to bat for them. They feel completely alone and those sorts of things. And so that often can hurt the attorneys as well. So the way law firms will use that is they'll have interview with attorneys. Anytime that I interview with a firm that was very serious about hiring me, they would always bring me back and have me go out to eat, whether for lunch or drinks or something, with an older attorney that I might be working with. And that would be a bonding thing. The law firm would often sometimes I would be called by people that I'd worked with in the past. Many times the attorneys will try to give advice about other law firms that the person might be interviewing with, or promote mentorship programs and so forth to the attorneys. And like I said, the most effective strategy typically is to have a prospective attorney go out with an older attorney for a one-on-one meeting, questions about hobbies, try to bond with a person and so forth. And that will make the younger attorney feel like someone's in their corner. That connection is important. It makes people feel supported and really does wonders for getting people to work there. Another thing that people do, and there's 15 of these, but the last 5 are fairly quick. They'll market their office location. Depending on the office location, that can be important. People typically will work in different places because of where offices are, and especially in markets like Los Angeles or even in New York, if you want to be downtown or uptown and all those sorts of things, parking, that can make a big difference. And many times law firms that are in the suburbs actually have a real advantage for different people. Like in Los Angeles, a lot of times there's firms in Santa Monica. People would love working in Santa Monica. Even in Detroit, there's firms in Bloomfield Hills and Birmingham as opposed to Detroit. In every market, there's places like that where people would prefer to work as opposed to that. And so people will choose firms based on that and whether or not the firm's close to their house and whether trains stop nearby and so forth. And many times law firms will open offices or have offices that are in just bad locations, and people will literally turn down offers with good firms they may not otherwise work with because of the office locations. And I remember I used to live and work in Pasadena, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. And there were a few firms there, and they actually paid a lot less than those downtown, but people would literally go to work there because they didn't want to have to make this commute on the 110 freeway to go downtown every day. That can be very important. There's another law firm I remember in Santa Monica where their rent was, they had an office that kind of overlooked the ocean in this a nice building on Ocean Avenue. When they couldn't afford it any longer, it destroyed the whole culture. The firm actually ended up closing. Benefits and perks are often used to get people to work there. I remember an attorney once accepted an offer that I knew because the firm had free lunch during the week every day. I've seen partners turn down offers where they were getting more money at a firm because they got a large business development budget. I remember when I was in law school, there was a firm in Detroit that was giving people down payment assistance to buy a house. It made the firm actually seem very attractive, especially compared to other firms. I remember another firm, Wachtell, offering messengers to use. Skadden Arps having a short closet. There's all sorts of, if you worked all night. And so people will choose law firms many times based on those sorts of things. And then another big one actually is relocation expenses. I have seen offers fall through all the time because a law firm isn't offering relocation expenses. I don't know, that's very important to many people. And, tickets to sporting events can be important. So all those sorts of things, same-sex partner benefits, CLE reimbursement, firm retreats, different sorts of gyms are another big one. Sometimes even firms will pay for dry cleaning. So all those things, cafeteria can make a big difference. Many times attorneys will just say that they chose a firm because they had better health insurance. I've seen that happen. I've seen many partners take offers because of the business development budget. And I've seen people turn down offers because of quality of health insurance and so forth. To get attorneys interested in this sort of stuff or working there, typically it doesn't come up until the person gets an offer. But if it does come up, these are the best way to get all the information about these benefits is really for the law firm just to answer questions about them as they come up after the person gets an offer. Okay, another big one now, and this is attorneys having the ability to choose when and where they work. And this is absolutely essential for many attorneys these days, and it may actually be a higher one. People want to be able to work at home. Sometimes people don't want to have to do FaceTime, and they want to know how often they're expected to be during the day. That's all very important. Working at home is often a condition of employment or having a few days at home a week, especially for mothers. Or I knew one man that needed to take care of his wife 2 days a week. Many people will actually, as work is becoming more and more virtual, will work far away from the office most of the week and then may take a day or two in the office. And the firm's kind of policies regarding that are very important. Many attorneys will just flat out take jobs because of the ability to work remotely. That's important to them. And many times they will reject jobs because they can't work remotely or need to be in the office all the time. And it really depends, many cases, on the attorney's practice area and the need for face-to-face interaction. But many attorneys do find they get a lot more work done at home and working remotely, and others, the law firm needs them to be in an environment where they're interacting with other attorneys. I personally am not sure how well that works. There were companies, for example, Yahoo, that allowed everyone to work remotely that believe they ran into a lot of trouble because of that. Other companies and law firms, virtual law firms, there are several of them, but for the most part, they haven't grown. I think there is a need, even as people were prohibited during the pandemic from working in offices, many law firms, the leadership was still in the office most days. So it's something to think about. Law firms often market themselves based on early responsibility. So those are things like going to court, running deals, depositions, briefs, and telling attorneys about that. So that's something that they'll market. And attorneys often will leave firms because they're not getting early responsibility. I saw one woman who started her career at Sullivan Cromwell where she was getting a ton, which is it's a massive, very prestigious firm, and running deals. Then she went to another firm and wasn't getting early responsibility like she was getting before and left. Partners sometimes will not trust people with very sophisticated work. I remember several instances where people haven't been trusted with sophisticated work that left. So many times people do want early responsibility, and they don't like people looking over their back, and they want to do things their way. And some law firms will tolerate that, others won't, and encourage it. And so they need to go where they feel comfortable. And many people will feel like they're not getting early responsibility and will leave or not take offers because of that. And those are valid reasons. There are firms where you could be very senior and not getting responsibility. If a law firm senses that you want early responsibility, I've been in interviews before where partners have said stuff like, I hate going to court. I need someone that I can rely on to go to court for me all the time. Why would I want to go to court? I don't want to be involved in this and that sort of thing. And those are some ways that a law firm will sell you on that. Sometimes they'll just market themselves based on offices. I visited one firm not too long ago where the firm gave me a tour that must have been, I don't know how long it was, but it was long, where they took me through and showed me how nice their offices were. They were nice, but that's not necessarily a reason that people go to workplaces, but sometimes they do. And so a law firm, certainly with very nice offices, it can make a difference because you are spending a lot of your day there. Furniture makes a difference, the size of the office the attorney would work in, the floor of the building and so forth. All that stuff views can be important, And then if the law firm has old offices, many times that can prevent people from wanting to go to work there. So law firms tend to be very proud of their offices. It's really the only tangible thing they have. The rest of it is work. So they can be very good recruiting tools. And there's all sorts of reasons for them to have to show off their offices. And then the big one that law firms do is they will market the size of the firm. So attorneys can be very nervous about working in a law firm that's only local. It doesn't have any national offices. These are huge recruiting tools. Having international offices, being a certain size. Many times attorneys are so proud of the size of their firm that they'll put on the rank in terms of its size in the world on their resume, which I don't recommend at all. But it gives attorneys the idea they could work internationally, and it makes make them very excited in that. They feel like they could move home sometimes to another office, which actually is very difficult to do in most firms. But if they're in one city, they feel they might be able to work in another office, that sort of thing. And partners can be fairly easily convinced to work in other offices as well. And these are just a few statements. People want to work in a larger firm. There's a perception that larger is better and that sort of thing. And then when law firms grow, they will point, to the fact that they're desirable based on their size many times. They let people know that. Okay, so that really is these reasons. I apologize. We usually try to limit these to an hour, the talk, and then I am going to, these are just some reasons that people give for not working in a firm because of the size. I will, in a second, we'll take questions. I'm going to take a break for about 2 minutes. And so just any questions that you have, if you could write them down, and I will come back and answer as many questions as anyone has about their career or anything today. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to get started with questions. Let's see here. Let me go here. I've often thought about learning how to play golf could be the best non-educational hobby to pick up that would help my career for networking and generating business. What is your thought on this? Certainly, I think golf can be a good way to generate business. I think a lot of people play golf. I think as an attorney, one of the problems playing golf is that it can take a lot of time. You can be billing, but if you learn, I think it is a fun sport, and certainly I play golf before and enjoy it. I just find it's hard to get the time to do that. But yeah, it could be a good educational hobby. Okay, let's see here. Paul Harrison, I've been a prosecutor my entire career, first with the state and currently with the federal government, but I now want to transition to an in-house labor and employment position. The problem is that I'm struggling crafting a resume that jumps out to recruiters because I don't have any labor and employment experience. Do you have any suggestions? Yeah, recruiters wouldn't be able to place you as a labor and employment attorney, probably as a prosecutor in a labor and employment attorney position. Recruiters really can only place people that have experience in a practice area in that job. So I certainly wouldn't be able to place you. But one of the ways to get the attention of employers probably would be to try to get work with maybe a smaller law firm. There's lots of small law firms that do both plaintiffs, labor and employment, or if you want to do defense, to get experience with one of them. And typically the best way of doing that might be to call and talk to someone and get them on the phone, as opposed to just sending a resume. Because if you just send a resume, it's going to be difficult for them to really justify bringing you in or doing anything. So that's how I would recommend doing that. Okay, Harrison, I was wrongfully accused and lied to at my workplace by a supervisor who did not like me. I was placed on leave without pay. I eventually resigned, but my supervisor told many lies about me. What advice do you have regarding my concerns? My advice would be if a former employer is lying to you about you in the market, then you should probably hire an attorney to talk to them and to stop. That would be what I would be. I don't know what happened exactly, but I think you probably need to talk to an attorney would be my advice. Or you could send them a letter yourself to cease and desist from that. Okay. Hi, I read your very intelligent analysis of why law firms are reluctant to hire senior attorneys, even if they will work at the lower rate of the junior associate. I am 63 and been practicing for 35 years as an insurance defense trial coverage attorney and most recently corporate claims counsel for a national insurer. I have applied to 30 or so managing attorney, litigation manager, complex litigation manager, legal resource, and advisor positions. I received 2 preliminary phone interviews, but none with the company to which I applied for about 8 positions. I expressed my intention to work indefinitely, advise them excellent help. What is your assessment of my circumstances that I am invisible to prospective employers? It doesn't sound like you're invisible. Getting phone interviews is good. Most jobs are difficult to get. Most law firms do prefer younger attorneys, even regardless of your age. The biggest thing with age, I think, is, and the reason people are concerned with age is not always because you can't work. Someone who's 63 clearly, has the energy to work and so forth. But the big issue is that they're worried that you may not be trainable and that you're set in your ways, that sort of thing. So that typically is the big concern I think that employers have, in my opinion, from what I've seen. The only other thing I'd recommend is I would just recommend to continue applying places. You don't necessarily need to put that you're 63 on your resume. Many times people will take off their graduation date. I don't know if that's a good idea, but I just would do whatever I can to reach out and look like the best applicant for different positions. Law firms will hire you if they can make money off you. If they believe that you have the work, the experience, and so forth, and they can put you to work, they will. Same thing with companies. I think it's a little bit easier to get hired in a law firm at the age of 63 than it is a company, but that would be how I would do that. Okay, let's see here. I recently read your article, The Interview Postmortem. Don't forget thank you notes. Your article suggests that it is inappropriate to send the same thank you note to multiple members of the same firm. Does this mean it is appropriate to reuse any portion of the thank yous? I put this question in context. I plan on reusing the token closing language. I'm a very hard worker and strongly believe I've been asked that your colleagues have offered a position. However, I have a separate opening paragraph for each attorney that highlights a unique topic during the interview. Would this be considered inappropriate? Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's probably okay to use that closing line. Definitely. I think that there's no issue with that. Okay. Hello, I am an attorney licensed to practice in California from a state accredited school. It was not an ABA school. I had to move to Utah for family issues and had no choice but staying here long term. I've been practicing for 3 years. I thought I could practice federal law in Utah, but apparently need to be licensed in Utah in order to do it. Furthermore, since my school was non-ABA, Utah has no reciprocity with California. I'm stuck practicing in California for an additional 10 years until I can take my examination in Utah. I'm very confused as how I cannot find a way around this. I was told the only exception is patent law, which I would need to take the patent bar exam and have scientific background, which I do not. Am I just out of luck since my law school is ABA accredited? Should I go going back to being a paralegal and suffer for 10 years? I don't know. If you really like practicing law, I think you may have to stay in California. People move for jobs all the time. There may be a way to work remotely for California firms now that people are doing things remotely. I don't know that you should necessarily have to be a paralegal, and there may be types of work you can do as a licensed attorney in California, not being sitting in California. I'm sure there are. So that's how I would get around that. But I don't think I would go and try to be a paralegal if you just because you moved. I don't think that makes any sense. But I really would strongly consider trying to get a remote position or at a minimum something else. Let's see. Okay, let's see. After working as part of administrative staff with different, yeah, guys, and ask as many questions as you have because I will answer as many as anyone has today. After working as part of administrative staff with different universities in the US for many years, I got almost for free many degrees in accounting, humanities, theology, and librarianship, among others, all of them with honors. Finally, I got a JD from a fourth-year law school. Too late as I have research ranking. Also, my grades weren't very good either. As I'm American and European ancestry, I went to law school in Europe and converted my American JD to a European JD, getting the highest grade there. In summary, by virtue of some treaties, currently I could be able to practice law in more than 70 countries and 5 continents. I can practice several languages and also in multiple citizen. With this background, I don't know which area of law is recommended to specialize in my cases. Many people recommended me international taxation, immigration, educational, or even religious laws. I studied 20 years. What do you think? I think you should do whatever you're most interested in. I think practice area typically would be corporate law, because that much of corporate law involves contracts and so forth and different types of matters, and can be done by people in different in different countries and so forth, and you can cross over. I don't know what religious laws is specifically. I think that any type of work that you do, you want to make sure that there's going to be access to a lot of work. So corporate law is one. Immigration is a great one. Typically, immigration law is a very good practice area, and you can certainly have very good educational background to do it, but you don't have to have a good educational background. And if you speak a lot of different languages and so forth and have all this international experience, that to me would be honestly the most logical one that I would go into. When you're dealing with individuals, they also don't care if you went to a first tier or second tier law school or how your grades were. Immigration law would be my recommendation for what I would do if I was you. I think your language experience will make a difference, your ability to identify with different types of people. And it just seems like a real skill. That's what you want to do. Individuals typically don't care about law schools like they do, like big law firms do. That's what I would do. Okay, I'm a small law firm. I went out on my own after several years at a big law firm. Oh, okay. See, I've been running my own thing since 2008. The talent that I get in associates is pathetic at the small law firm. I'm getting people who are negligent, have a poor work ethic, can't handle stress of litigation or problem solving, and push it back up on me, and are generally prima donnas who have no idea what an incredibly nice employer I am. No billable hours. Everyone gets most nights, weekends, and holidays off. I deal with all the crap most of the time. Anyway, it's hindering my growth as a firm. I still want to be a nice place to work, but I want lawyers who appreciate it. I want lawyers who will turn out good work product and work late when we're in trial without whining. I'm thinking I need to get former big law associates who don't mind a pay cut in order to have a tolerable life. I gather from your blog you might have a bank of those. What do I do to attract better talent? Can your firm help? This is a good question. This is the kind of stuff that we do for a living, but you need to position your firm as a good place to work. And if you are doing trials and so forth, you need to position that. You need to be able to sell the prospect of upward mobility, the early experience, and you need to find the right place. And typically, you need to have the best offer to people. So that means you need to be able to give the attorneys that are thinking about working there access to what would be either the most money or the most responsibility or the most upward mobility and all that sort of thing. So that is how I would approach that if it was me, work from that. But you need to, typically when you're experiencing the issues you are with a poor work ethic, negligent, the stress and so forth, that can be a pay issue. And the more money you pay, the better people you will get. In my experience, I've hired law students that are incredibly competent. I know that when they get out, they're going to be competent, but I also know that they're going to be able to get good jobs. So they need to be, if you were hiring them as a practicing attorney, you would need to pay them well. So that's how I would recommend doing that. Okay, let's see. Hello. I already did this one. Okay. Let's see. I have read this week's article about generating business. I had a quick question. I recently opened my own firm and want to specialize in bankruptcy. However, recently I had a potential client come in for a free consultation about entering a business partnership. I consulted with the potential client and their business partner. They did not retain me at the time and have not yet followed up with, and I have not yet followed up with them. I told them if they needed it done immediately, they can contact a colleague of mine and gave them a referral, as they seemed to be in a rush and I was leaving town for a few days. Anyway, I don't believe they contacted the referral for assistance, nor have they gotten back to me. It's been a few weeks. Is it pushy if I contact the potential client directly or just take it as a loss? I appreciate your input. Yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of attorneys will charge consultation fees and so forth to meet with people. Some won't, but many will. And many will screen people before they come in with a bunch of questions. It's not pushy to contact them. As a matter of fact, you need to probably be pushy as possible as a new attorney. That's how I would recommend doing that. As a new attorney, you will find you will get a lot of people coming in to see you that will waste your time. That's part of the job, is you need to kiss a lot of frogs before you meet a prince. You definitely need to make sure that you're develop follow-up procedures and also protect yourself from people wasting your time. So that's one of the things that solos tend to hate, is they get a lot of people wasting their time. So you need to find kind of good ongoing clients. Let's see. Do the majority of big law firms still have a stressful work attitude, and what is the minimum pay a senior associate expect from a mid-sized law firm in California? I think a lot of law firms do have a stressful work attitude. They're all going to be stressful because they represent clients and people that have very important matters many times that they're facing, and so that's just something to be aware of. I think depending on a large firm or a mid-sized firm, most mid-sized firms will pay a senior associate over $150,000 a year. Some won't, but that would be, and then certainly larger law firms more, but it depends on the work and what they're doing. Okay, let's see. I'm a paralegal, and if anybody has some more questions, I think that's about it. So any more, then I'll happy to answer. I'm a paralegal who has worked as a political consultant for an attorney that was disciplined by the bar and is very much an outsider. Okay, another attorney criticized him, saying he was disciplined by the bar. I told her that while the bar is not a fraternity, which would throw you out because they don't like you, they can be very tough on people they do not care for, like my boss, who is always running for office and very lenient with people they do not like. The attorney I was talking to was very offended and started yelling. The attorney I was working for was very offended, started yelling and screaming until somebody asked her to leave me alone. Another attorney told me that regardless of whether or not they agreed with me, no reasonable lawyer would have been offended by what I said. What do I do when people criticize my boss for having issues with the bar? I just wouldn't get involved in that. I think I don't know what you have to gain. So I just, that's how I would handle that personally. Okay, let's see. If anyone doesn't have any other questions, I'll answer this last one. Let's see. How do I explain that I lost my job due to my boss asking me to do things that were unethical? I think if that was the case, I think I've seen a lot of people lose jobs for reasons like that. And I actually saw one attorney lose a job and they refused to do something that was very unethical. I think actually misstating some financial results or something. Anytime something like that happens, you do want to figure out kind of a way to deal with it. The problem is you don't want to say things in an interview that are going to make it look like that you're going to get the firm, you're going to talk badly about that employer. I don't know what the issue is specifically or what was unethical, but I think you need to be very careful about how you frame that. I would just, sometimes it's better to say something along the lines of, I left because there were some things going on there that made me uncomfortable, and leave it at that. And that doesn't say anything about it being unethical. It could be sexual harassment, anything. You don't know. They don't know. And just say, I'd rather not say anything about the firm. There were just some things going on there that made me uncomfortable. And I felt like I was making a good decision, but my work was thought of very highly. But I just worked very hard to be in the bar, and I didn't want to jeopardize anything. And that's really all I prefer to say. Something along those lines would be good. But typically talking about your experience and so forth is really the best thing you can do, and try to steer the conversation there. Typically, a lot of employers aren't going to ask too much about why you left, but some of them will, and that's how I would handle that. Okay, let's see here. Are big law firms on the lookout for international business of a business plan of 20 million, or whether they normally are interested in business outside the US? Yes, law firms are interested in international business from attorneys, and especially if there's a lot of business and they're willing to open offices internationally many times for that business, if it's the right type of client. Yeah. Okay, thank you everyone, and I will be back next week. And then if anyone has any questions in the interim, just write them down and I'll answer them for you next week. Thank you.